Hi there, it's Danny here, Danny Hickling, and I'm an integrative counsellor working in the UK. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about relationships, and actually a particular aspect of relationships, which is attachment styles. Attachment styles were the word was first coined by kind of two people who worked with children, and that was the name of Bowlby and also Mary Ainsworth, two psychologists that worked together, and they worked on with children in particular, because it was noticed this chap called Bowlby back in the 1950s, I think it was, noticed that children reacted in certain ways when they were left, in particular in hospitals, because back in that culture children were often left in hospital on their own without the parents throughout the week. And when the parents returned, he noticed that they reacted in different ways. Certainly, of course, they reacted negatively to being left on their own, but they also reacted in different ways when the parents came back to the children. So they actually devised this something they called the strange room, which was a room where the mother would sit with a child in this experiment, and a stranger would come into the room, and then after a short while, whilst the child was playing with toys, the mother would leave the room for a minute. Now, this kind of goes, attachment is one of those things that effectively glues us together. It's an interpersonal aspect of us which connects us, and it's that which actually keeps our relationships together. So going back to this strange situation where the mother would leave the child just for a moment while they're being observed with this stranger. Now, it was noted that the children acted in one of three different ways initially. So when the mum left the room for a few minutes with the stranger in the room, in this kind of waiting room, came back into the room, the mum would come back in, and the child would act in one of three different ways. So this has since been called, these were eventually named different attachment styles. So the children would, first of all, roughly 45% of them, so roughly 45% of them would act in a way which was deemed like insecure, which we'll get to. 65% would have a secure attachment style. So I said 55%, sorry. So 55% would have a secure attachment style, 45% an insecure attachment style. So the 55% of children generally, when the mother returned, recovered quite quickly. At first they'd run up to the mum, they'd be a little bit upset sometimes, but they'd often just give her a hug, then they'd go back to playing. And if they were upset, they'd quickly settle down. And then there were two other groups of children which both come under the guise of insecure attachment, but they reacted in slightly different ways. There was an insecure, they called them at the time insecure ambivalent, which meant they were slightly conflicted in the way they reacted, but generally they would get very upset and they would take a long time to calm down, to recover from being left on their own for a short while. So they were called insecure ambivalent. Then the other part of the group was the insecure avoidant. Now those children would react quite often. They may ignore the mum when they come back. They may, if the mum went to hug them, they may struggle to get away, to avoid contact, and they would sometimes appear frustrated or annoyed that the mum had left them. They might turn with their back to the mum. So those are the three attachment styles. Now, you may kind of think, well, that's children, so does that have any effect on us as an adult? Well, later studies went on. First of all, I must note, Mary Ainsworth noticed that there was one other child that asked a group of children which didn't fall into those three attachment styles, and they eventually called that the chaotic or disorganized attachment style. They were like an insecure attachment style, but they zigzagged in what they did. There was no consistent way they reacted. Sometimes they would be unconsolable. It would take a long time to settle down. Other times they would be really annoyed or frustrated and avoidant. So they would blip from the ambivalent to avoidant attachment style, and they call that chaotic attachment style or disorganized attachment style. Now, if we zip ahead in history a little bit, because this was going back to the 50s, eventually they kind of established, well, there were very clear attachment styles in adults as well. There were a couple of psychologists which in the 1980s devised a questionnaire. Cindy Hansen and Philip Shaver. They came up with 3 distinct groups which picked up those 3 attachment styles, which in adults, the ambivalent one often gets dropped and they call it anxious, and the anxious bit of the avoidant often gets dropped and they just call it avoidant. So they end up with secure, anxious and avoidant attachment styles. Now, there's a questionnaire, so maybe give it a go for yourself. See what you think of these 3 options. There's a questionnaire of the 3 options of which one simply describes how they usually act when they're in love, in a relationship. The first option comes up with this statement: I find it relatively easy to get close to others, and I am comfortable depending on them and having them depend on me. I don't worry about being abandoned or about someone getting too close to me. And I'm going to come up with the answers as to what the attachment styles are in a minute. Option 2, I find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I often worry that my partner doesn't really love me or won't want to stay with me. I want to get very close to my partner, and this sometimes scares people away. But then the last option is I am somewhat uncomfortable being close to others. I find it difficult to trust them completely, difficult to allow myself to depend on them. I'm nervous when anyone gets too close. And often others want me to be more intimate than I feel comfortable in being. So option 1, I find it relatively easy to get close to others, was the secure attachment style. Option 2, I find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. The one which was slightly more preoccupied in the attachment. That attachment style is they call the insecure attachment style. So that's the insecure, which used to be called insecure ambivalent. Then option 3, I'm somewhat uncomfortable being close to others. I find it difficult to trust them completely, is the avoidant attachment style. So holding that awareness of what your attachment style is quite important in getting relationships right, especially as there seems to be statistically a high incidence in one attachment style, of avoidant insecure attachment style, tends to often pair off with the insecure. So avoidant and insecures often end up pairing off. Now, I've written a little bit on my website, crystalclearcounselling.co.uk, about the different attachment styles and how they tend to kind of react together, how they tend to work together. You can imagine, for instance, like insecure avoidant and insecure avoidant attachment styles. So two avoidants, well, it could well be that they're actually so distant that they never quite actually make it into a relationship. So for instance, if we talk a little bit about how those attachment styles work in relationships, how they tend to react to others. The insecure attachment style tends to be quite preoccupied with a relationship, if it's working, if it's not working, spend a lot of time talking about it, possibly have a higher tendency to be more possessive or jealous at times if really pushed. The avoidant attachment style is quite good at getting on by themselves, to the point that sometimes the insecure attachment style could get really frustrated by it. So that's something that sometimes plays off. Then the insecure attachment style, getting very frustrated, will try and pull the avoidant person closer, and of course the avoidant person can feel quite threatened by that and pull away. Secure attachment styles speak for themselves. They tend to stay in long, secure relationships, and are less likely to leave a relationship. Avoidant attachment styles will put up with more distant relationships, sometimes even to a point where they may have a relationship with someone who may not actually be able to commit. They might be in another relationship already, they may be having an affair, they may be a long distance relationship, and they will cope quite well with that. But obviously an insecure attachment style, I'm going to find that quite so easy. The other one thing to add to this is, in the last decade or so, it's been learned that the brain has what they call neuroplasticity. It's quite fluid, adaptable, and does change. So interpersonal relationships will change us. And in that way, if we stick with it long enough, even if we are an insecure attachment style, avoidant attachment style, the right relationship can change us if we stick with it. And often a relationship with a secure partner statistically stands a slightly better chance of surviving, of course. But even that secure partner can, if someone was particularly avoidant, have a tendency to feel insecure. So the point is, we are all a little bit fluid in our attachment style. Attachment styles can change, but having some knowledge of it, some concept of it, can help the way we react with each other. If you'd like any more details, have a look at crystalclearcounselling.co.uk. I work here from Cromer and Norwich and online. I'm a UKCP registered Psychotherapeutic Counsellor, and I'm also registered with a BACP, which is the other main counselling body in the UK. I hope you found this useful, and speak to you soon. Bye bye.